So finally, Thunderbolts came out, and I had high hopes for this movie, but so far none of my high hopes have ever been fulfilled, and Thunderbolts asterisk, I forgot to mention that, very important, Thunderbolts asterisk is no different. Marvel has been getting a lot of backlash for their lack of direction and just inability to keep the MCU on track, and I figured that with Brave New World, people would actually start to see that. But once again, just like Brave New World, people are already shilling this movie away saying, no, this one's going to be different. This one's actually going to be good, when it's not. There's only two things I liked about this movie, but they're both completely disconnected from the movie itself, just in a vacuum. A bunch of articles were saying stuff like it's going to be a different style production than the other MCU movies, more like a A24 vibe, and it's like, it's not that deep. I just saw this movie and the vibe is no different than any other MCU movie. If anything, it's actually worse, and I'll get into all that later on. The trailers are very frustrating as usual. They just beat around the bush of what the story is actually going to be. The official trailer is the only one that actually addresses the villain fully, but even though it's the main trailer, it's clear that it's not the main trailer. Like I said in my Brave New World review, trailers are losing their spirit and Marvel is definitely feeding into that. From this point forward, I will be talking spoilers, so if you want my final verdict spoiler free, skip to this time in the video. So one thing I liked about the movie was the characters, for the most part. Yelena is cool. It was nice to see her as a main character in something, since Marvel has been trying to make her seem like a main character for years at this point. Bucky's also good, but he's not in the movie as much as I'd like him to be. There's arguments to be made that he should be the main character of this movie, but other than that, he fits into the Thunderbolts group really nicely. I really like John Walker. Ever since Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I really liked his character, along with a lot of other people too, but as crazy as it sounds, this wasn't really Marvel's intention. In the TV show, he's supposed to be this toxic white man with the blonde hair and the blue eyes who's clearly a ticking time bomb with the power he has. Gee, I've never heard of anything like that before. Anyways, he killed some person who kind of deserved to be killed, but regardless, he got his title as Captain America stripped away from him, and then Anthony Mackie comes back and race swaps Captain America for the second time. Now, I fully recognize the moral grayness of what John Walker did, but it feels like no one else is willing to recognize it. Yeah, the guy didn't get proper justice, and John did kill him while he was kind of surrendering. I won't defend him for that stuff, but to pretend like this guy that he killed was just walking down the street sucking on a fucking lollipop, flying a kite is just insane to me. John Walker was justified to an extent. There was literally some idiot on Reddit that said something along the lines of like, it doesn't matter the context of the killing. The crowd saw what they saw, and that's all that matters. And these people call us media illiterate. There was a bunch of people saying that what he did was not okay because he did it in a foreign country, but it's completely okay when the black people do it because they're just trying to protect their resources and their cultural values. Gee, I've never heard of anything like that before either. Anyways, it was just nice to see that Marvel had the balls to give John Walker a redemption arc after all these years. I just hate when Marvel has a chance to let one of their heroes kill someone in a very brutal way to make for a more powerful character arc, but they always pussy out, and then when they actually do it, they do it the wrong way. Anyways, Red Guardian is cool, but I think he kind of carries the story a little bit too much, and this is kind of one of the struggles I had with Yelena, is that she's kind of hard to relate to, even though she's in so many MCU things. The only feature-length installment that she was really in was Black Widow, and that was so long ago. And it feels like Red Guardian is kind of the relief of that feeling. That might just be me, but he definitely carries the story a lot. Ghost returns, which I was super excited about. I really liked her character in the Ant-Man sequel, so it was really cool to see that crossover. The only thing I thought was a little weird was that she was kind of an afterthought in Ant-Man and the Wasp, so going from that to now a mercenary for the CIA director was a little bit far-fetched, but not too big a deal. Taskmaster, there's not really much to say. The marketing sets her up to be one of the actual Thunderbolts, but Ghost just kills her as soon as they meet. So just some blatant false advertising on Marvel's part that had no implication in the plot. Then there's Val, who's the CIA director, but that title means nothing in this movie. She's just this evil woman with her research team and her little army, just typical lazy superhero villain writing. I get it, kinda, but if you're gonna make her this big person in the government, actually lean into it like they did with Thaddeus Ross. They actually treated him like a Secretary of State and eventually the president. Then there's Bob, who's played by Lewis Pullman, the same guy who played Bob in Top Gun Maverick. I don't think that was intentional, but it immediately killed my immersion because that fact was just so distracting for a few minutes. He's basically this meth head lab rat that Val was doing research on to create the perfect superhero. This trope is getting really annoying, but nevertheless, he doesn't even look like a meth head. He just looks like an average, everyday, law-abiding citizen that pays his taxes. The story is just surprisingly underwhelming and slow. I actually enjoyed Brave New World more than I enjoyed this movie because at least I wasn't bored, and even though that movie was kind of a mess, it at least had me engaged to an extent. I wouldn't say I was bored to death, but for a Marvel movie, it just felt so damn slow and padded out. I'm gonna break the plot down, but the truth is that it really doesn't matter. The story of this movie isn't supposed to matter. The only purpose this movie serves is that it sets up the Thunderbolts. And this was the other thing that I liked about the movie, is that the dynamic between this group of characters is just really good, and I may even be excited to see what happens with them in the future. But it was just so clear that this movie was just supposed to be the prologue to the Thunderbolts in Avengers Doomsday. It doesn't matter how they're set up, just as long as they're set up. Basically, Val is being impeached and she wants to destroy all the evidence of her crimes, so she deploys all of her loose ends on a setup mission to this facility where she's going to incinerate them along with all the evidence. Bob is also there with them because he's evidence as well. They're all forced to team up in order to escape. Bob uses himself as a decoy and sacrifices himself so that the rest of the group can escape. By this point, we're already almost halfway through the movie. In an ideal setup, I think this whole escape from the facility should have probably just been the opening scene, but even still, they lean into it a little bit too much. To be fair, they are going back and forth to the Val plotline and the Bucky plotline, but it just made the plot seem slow. Yelena, John, and Ghost all get picked up by Red Guardian. I guess he knew where they were somehow. They all get captured by Bucky so he can bring them in as evidence against Val, but then he's starting to kind of realize that they all have similar motivations to go after Val. Then they all attack the old Stark Tower, which I really like where this is going. Not really the story, but just the whole tower thing. This is something I thought of way back in 2021, which was that it would be cool to see like a bad version of the Avengers eventually, and their base of operations is the original Avengers Tower. Anyways, they all confront Val, and she reveals that Bob is alive, and he was actually the perfect superhero that she was creating to basically replace the Avengers, but the problem is that he's just way too OP, and the solution that they have to this is just beyond dumb. I'll get into all that here in a minute. I hate the way they set up Bob as Sentry because Bob isn't really that interesting in the first place. Yelena, for some reason, just gets immediately attached to him out of nowhere right at the beginning. And they throw this like pity party for him. What I'm trying to say is that his character is very forced. Obviously, he's the main villain of this story, but we're over halfway through the movie and he's only just now being revealed. Ant-Man, Doctor Strange, Spider-Man Homecoming, and Far From Home, Avengers Infinity War. These were all movies where the villain was introduced in the first 5 minutes of the movie. Nowadays, they want to drag it out for as long as they can for like the dumbest reasons. Marvel seems to have a villain problem. To me, as someone who doesn't really follow the Thunderbolts comics that closely, I could immediately tell that Bob was going to be the villain of this story. But in the marketing, they tried to keep Sentry's identity sort of ambiguous to the audience that doesn't religiously follow the Thunderbolts comics, which is not what Marvel needs to be doing right now. It's killing their writing. I could also see casual moviegoers just being completely confused as to what the point of Bob's character is up until the plot twist, and they're just like, okay, maybe not, but it's clear that the plot is pushing his character instead of the reverse. Anyways, Sentry is just OP and he just humiliates everyone. By this point, I was just thinking to myself, I wonder how they're going to spin this. The Thunderbolts leave, then Sentry betrays Val, but they have this kill switch, but don't expect a real explanation though. They turn him off, doesn't matter because the dark side comes out of him and then he just starts consuming New York City and like swallowing people into the shadow realm. He's supposed to be like one of the biggest threats that Earth has ever seen, and I fully get that they're trying to set up like the new Avengers and everything, but it just reeked of Quantumania writing. The rest is stupid, like I said earlier. In order to defeat Sentry, they have to go into the shadow realm themselves and then fight him from the inside, and this trope is just so annoying and boring. I can't stand it anymore. They find Bob chilling in the shadow realm and then they have to go find Sentry. They find him. Bob starts beating the shit out of him, but it's not really doing anything. The Thunderbolts look at each other and are like, this isn't right for whatever reason. But instead of stopping Bob, they just go up to him and hug him while he's beating up Sentry. Amateurs. These writers are amateurs. You know, they're not even amateurs because that would be an insult to people who would do this stuff for free and still put more heart into it. This has to be one of the most anti-climactic, most abrupt endings to a Marvel movie I think I've ever seen. Madam fucking Web had a better ending than this movie did. I honestly just feel bad for all the people who shill these movies away because they're so starved for storytelling that they'll just eat up anything that isn't pure slop, even if it's just mediocre below average. The movie ends when Val spins everything like she created the Thunderbolts as like the new Avengers, but Yelena doesn't even do anything. She just goes along with it, understanding that she now has leverage over Val. Why? She has everything she needs to put her in jail. At what point is this just The Boys, where it's all about corruption and public relations? They also tease the Fantastic Four as if it adds anything to the movie coming out in July. Like, people are in theaters like, no way. Fantastic Four is coming to the MCU? You're fucking with me, right? You're fucking with me. In all seriousness, are the Thunderbolts making an appearance in Fantastic Four? I mean, why not just tease Avengers Doomsday? You only have a year to do it. Might as well get started. The plot was slow, like I said. It's not even really clear what the plot is until over halfway through the movie. There's a lot of comic relief following scenes that didn't really need relief because those scenes were just boring. There's convenient writing, like when Val traps them in the incinerator, there's a clock on the wall that tells them how much time they have to get out effectively. It's just like, why don't you just incinerate them right then and there? There's a lot of all that for a drop of blood moments where they do something super over the top only to achieve something relatively small. There's one random scene where Bob is trying not to sneeze or it'll put them in danger. Is this a superhero movie or a kid's cartoon? The message of the movie has to do with like family and loving those close to you, which is fine, but I really think with a group like the Thunderbolts, they should have leaned into more of like the addressing your past mistakes and just the whole reformed villain thing. The visual effects are actually regressive. This is like, what, the 35th or 36th feature-length installment in the MCU, and they don't know how to make the action look realistic. And I don't know if it's because I saw the movie in 3D that it looked like this, but a lot of the times the physics just looked far-fetched and the CGI just looked not that great. The politics aren't as bad as in like a handful of recent Marvel movies, but they still just can't really let it go. There's a part where Val tells Yelena, I like to promote women, but they never promote women, so I don't even know why they put that in there. There's also a more subtle insert in the credits sequence that's really easy to miss. They put Yelena's face on the We Can Do It poster, and it's like, look, all the female superheroes in this movie earned their title as a badass female, especially Yelena, so Marvel, please do not ruin that for us. Then, like always, you have the writers making John Walker look like a toxic white man like they usually do. So that was Thunderbolts, asterisk. For my final verdict, I'll be ruling against this movie at 48%. Ever since Spider-Man and just like the Sinister Six, I was always fascinated by the potential of the Thunderbolts, and I do still think they have potential, but this movie just makes me not excited for the future. I would only recommend this movie if you're like a super close follower of the MCU lore, but besides that, this has to be one of, if not the worst MCU movie I've seen ever. And I haven't seen the Marvels, by the way, so that one might be worse than this one, but this one's the worst one that I've seen so far. Anyways, that's all for today. If you enjoyed my review, please consider dropping a like and hitting subscribe, but that's all for this case. This court is adjourned.